I've been flying first class for decades, and I've never seen anything this disgusting. His words weren't just rude, they were a gut punch to basic human decency. Sarah Mitchell, a white human rights lawyer, said in a trembling voice, her eyes wide with disbelief as she recounted the jaw-dropping confrontation that brought Horizon Airlines flight HA-247 from Chicago to Los Angeles to a screeching halt. This explosive moment, caught on video and now blowing up online with over 2 million views in just hours, exposed a raw, ugly truth about prejudice at 3,000 feet. Before we dive into this gripping story, I want to know, where are you watching this from? Hit that subscribe button to stay updated on stories like this, and give us a like to spread the message of justice and dignity. Now, let's step into the first-class cabin where it all began. Maya Johnson, the 38-year-old black CEO of Horizon Airlines, boarded flight HA-247 on a sunny June afternoon, her navy blazer crisp and her leather tote gleaming with understated elegance. Fresh off a grueling boardroom battle in Chicago to secure funding for Horizon's new trans-Pacific routes. Maya was looking forward to 4 quiet hours in Seat 2A to refine her keynote for a sustainability summit in Los Angeles. Her presence radiated confidence, a testament to years of climbing the corporate ladder against the odds. From her working-class roots in Atlanta to the helm of one of America's fastest-growing airlines. But as she approached her assigned seat, she found it occupied by Edward Langston, a 52-year-old white real estate tycoon from Chicago, his tailored gray coat draped possessively over the adjacent Seat 2B. Edward glanced up at Maya, his eyes narrowing with a smug disdain. "I need both seats to work," he declared, his tone icy and entitled. "You must be mistaken. People like you should double-check their tickets." The words, laced with unmistakable racial undertones, hung heavy in the air, drawing a sharp breath from nearby passengers. Maya, unfazed, took a steadying breath and held up her phone. The Horizon Airlines app displaying her boarding pass for Seat 2A. "This is my seat, sir," she said, her voice calm but firm, carrying just enough to be heard by those nearby. Edward didn't even glance at the screen. He crossed his arms, smirked, and said, "I paid $5,000 for this flight. I have more right to this space than you do." The cabin, usually a haven of hushed luxury, grew tense, the soft clink of champagne glasses replaced by uneasy murmurs. Sarah Mitchell, a 35-year-old human rights lawyer seated in 3C, felt her blood boil. With her blonde hair neatly tied back and wire-rimmed glasses perched on her nose. Sarah had spent years fighting discrimination in courtrooms and wasn't about to stay silent. She set her book down, her gaze locked on Maya, sensing the injustice unfolding. Across the aisle in 3D, James Carter, a 42-year-old freelance journalist with a weathered backpack stuffed under his seat, also took notice. His instincts, honed from years of chasing stories across the globe, told him this was no ordinary dispute. He slipped his phone from his pocket, fingers poised to record. The atmosphere thickened as a few passengers began whispering, their eyes darting between Maya and Edward. A young mother in 4A clutched her toddler closer, shaking her head in quiet disapproval. An older businessman in 2C adjusted his glasses, his frown deepening. Maya stood her ground, her posture unwavering, her eyes locked on Edward's. She knew this wasn't just about a seat. It was a challenge to her dignity, her right to be respected regardless of her race or gender. "Sir, I'm asking you to return my seat," she said, her voice steady, each word deliberate. Edward scoffed, shaking his head as if Maya's request was absurd. He leaned back, spreading his coat further across 2B, a silent claim of dominance. The tension in the cabin was palpable, like a storm gathering strength. Sarah Mitchell couldn't hold back any longer. She stood, stepping into the aisle, her voice cutting through the silence. "Sir, she has a valid ticket. You can't just take someone else's seat because you feel like it. Edward turned, his face reddening with irritation. Who are you to butt into my business? He snapped, his tone dripping with condescension. Sarah didn't flinch. I'm someone who doesn't tolerate injustice, she shot back, her words sharp and clear. You need to respect her rights. The exchange drew more eyes, and the whispers grew louder. James Carter, now filming discreetly, leaned toward the passenger next to him, a middle-aged woman in a silk scarf. I think that's Maya Johnson, the CEO of Horizon Airlines, he murmured, his voice low but excited. The woman's eyes widened, and she passed the whisper along, the news rippling through the cabin like a current. Passengers began pulling out their phones, some to record, others to search Maya's name. The atmosphere shifted, charged with a mix of outrage and anticipation. Maya, sensing the growing support, remained composed, her expression betraying none of the anger simmering beneath. She knew that losing her cool would only play into Edward's hands. Instead, she stood tall, her presence a quiet rebuke to his arrogance. Edward, oblivious to the shifting tide, doubled down. This is my space, he said, his voice rising. I don't care what your app says. People like you don't belong in first class. The overt racism in his words sent a collective gasp through the cabin. The young mother in 4A shook her head again, muttering. Unbelievable. The businessman in 2C cleared his throat, as if debating whether to intervene. Sarah's hands clenched into fists, her lawyer's instincts screaming to call out the injustice. James, his camera still rolling, zoomed in on Edward's scowl, knowing this footage could spark a firestorm. Maya, however, remained the eye of the storm. She understood that this confrontation was bigger than her personal comfort. It was a fight for respect, for equality, for the right to exist in a space without being diminished. She took another slow breath, her mind racing with options. She could escalate this to the flight crew, but she knew that would only be a temporary fix. Edward's entitlement, rooted in privilege and prejudice, required a stronger response. In her tote. Her phone buzzed softly with notifications from her team, but she ignored it for now. Instead, she met Edward's gaze, her eyes steady and unyielding. I'll ask you one more time to return my seat, she said, her voice carrying a quiet authority that silenced the murmurs around her. Edward laughed, a harsh, dismissive sound, and turned back to his iPad, as if Maya were no more than a minor annoyance. But the cabin was no longer on his side. The passengers' whispers grew bolder, their phones capturing every moment. Sarah and James exchanged a glance, a silent agreement that this wasn't just a seat dispute, it was a stand for something greater. Maya, sensing the moment, prepared to make her next move, one that would shift the power dynamic in ways Edward could never anticipate. As Edward Langston's mocking laughter sliced through the first-class cabin of Horizon Airlines Flight HA247, the air thickened with outrage, the murmurs of passengers swelling into a low hum of dissent that threatened to erupt. Maya Johnson, standing resolute by seat 2A, felt the weight of every eye on her, yet her composure remained unshaken. Her dark eyes locked on Edward's with a quiet intensity that seemed to unnerve him, though he masked it with a sneer. His refusal to acknowledge her boarding pass had turned a simple seat dispute into a public spectacle, and his latest barb. People like you don't belong in first class, hung in the air like a toxic cloud, its racial undertones igniting fury among the onlookers. Sarah Mitchell, the human rights lawyer in 3C, gripped the armrests of her seat, her knuckles whitening as she leaned forward, unable to contain her anger any longer. You're out of line, she said, her voice sharp and authoritative, cutting through the cabin's tension like a blade. This isn't about money or status, it's about basic respect. Move to your own seat. Edward's head snapped toward her, his face flushing a deep red. Stay out of this, lady, he spat, his tone venomous. I'm a VIP on this airline, and I don't answer to you or her. The word her dripped with contempt as he gestured dismissively at Maya, who stood unwavering, her posture a pillar of dignity amidst his vitriol. James Carter, the journalist in 3D, adjusted his phone's camera angle, capturing every word, his jaw tight as he recognized the story unfolding. A textbook case of entitlement clashing with justice. The cabin's atmosphere was now electric, passengers shifting uncomfortably, some whispering heatedly, others openly glaring at Edward. A young mother in 4A, her toddler now asleep in her arms, muttered to her neighbor, "He's making a fool of himself." Rachel Nguyen, a 28-year-old flight attendant with a calm but firm demeanor, stepped forward, her navy uniform pristine as she tried to de-escalate. "Sir, please, we need to follow seating assignments for safety and fairness," she said, her voice professional but tinged with frustration. Edward whirled on her, his Rolex glinting as he jabbed a finger in her direction. "Don't lecture me about rules. Sweetheart, I've been flying with Horizon longer than you've been pouring coffee. I need this space, and I'm not moving." Rachel's eyes flickered with indignation, but she held her ground, glancing at Maya with a look that conveyed both sympathy and helplessness. Maya, sensing the crew's predicament, knew that arguing further with Edward would only fuel his ego. Instead, she let her silence speak, her steady gaze a challenge he couldn't ignore. The businessman in 2C, who had been silent until now, cleared his throat and spoke up, his voice gruff. "This is ridiculous. Just show some respect and move." His words, though simple, carried weight, emboldening others. A college student in 5B began typing furiously on her phone, posting a live update to her 1,000 followers on Instagram with the hashtag #HorizonJustice. James, catching the post on his feed, leaned toward the woman next to him and whispered, "This is going viral already. That's Maya Johnson, the CEO. He has no idea who he's messing with." The woman gasped, passing the news along, and soon half the cabin was buzzing with the revelation. Sarah, seizing the moment, stood again, her lawyer's instincts kicking in. "You're not just disrespecting her," she said to Edward, her voice ringing with conviction. "You're disrespecting everyone here by acting like your money gives you the right to treat people like garbage." Edward's smirk faltered for a split second, but he doubled down, his voice rising to a near shout. "I built a fortune from nothing. I don't need a lecture from some do-gooder or—" He paused, glaring at Maya. "Someone who thinks they can play the victim card." The cabin erupted in gasps, the overt racism in his words stripping away any pretense of civility. Rachel, now visibly shaken, reached for her walkie-talkie, signaling to the lead flight attendant for backup. Maya, however, raised a hand subtly, gesturing for Rachel to hold off. She knew that calling security prematurely might escalate things physically, and she wanted to handle this with precision. Her mind flashed to her childhood in Atlanta, where she'd faced similar slights, teachers doubting her potential, neighbors questioning her place in advanced classes. Each time, she'd turned their doubt into fuel, and now, as CEO, she had the power to do more than just win an argument. She adjusted her stance, her voice low but cutting. "Mr. Langston, your money doesn't entitle you to my seat or my dignity. I'm asking you one last time to move." Edward laughed again, but it was hollow, his confidence cracking under the weight of the cabin's collective judgment. James, still filming, zoomed in on Maya's poised expression, knowing her restraint was more powerful than any outburst. Sarah, now standing shoulder to shoulder with Maya, added, "You're not above the rules, and you're not above basic human decency." The passengers' murmurs grew louder, a chorus of disapproval that Edward could no longer ignore. The young mother in 4A spoke up, her voice trembling but clear. "You're the one causing a scene. Just do the right thing." Edward's face twisted with rage, but he was beginning to sense the tide turning against him. He glanced around, noticing the phones pointed at him, the disapproving stares, the whispered accusations, yet his pride refused to yield. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper directed at Maya. "You think you can humiliate me? I'll make sure this airline regrets crossing me." Maya met his gaze, unflinching, her silence more powerful than his threats. She knew this was no longer just about her seat. It was about exposing the kind of entitlement that thrives on belittling others. Rachel, still standing nearby, exchanged a glance with another crew member who had just arrived, a tall man with a badge identifying him as Kevin, the lead flight attendant. Kevin's presence signaled that the situation was nearing a breaking point, but Maya's calm demeanor suggested she had a plan. In her tote. Her phone buzzed again, a message from her executive assistant confirming that the crew had been alerted to her identity. Maya's lips curved into the faintest hint of a smile, not one of triumph, but of resolve. She knew that Edward's arrogance was about to meet its match, not through shouting or force, but through the quiet strength of her authority and the growing solidarity of the passengers around her. The cabin, now a pressure cooker of emotions, waited for the next move. Every phone and eye trained on the standoff that was about to redefine power and respect at 3,000 feet. As the first-class cabin of Horizon Airlines Flight HA-247 crackled with tension, Maya Johnson's faint, knowing smile sent a ripple of unease through Edward Langston, who sat defiantly in her seat, 2A, his smug demeanor faltering under the weight of the passengers' accusing stares and the relentless hum of their whispered outrage. The standoff had reached a fever pitch, with Edward's menacing whisper. "I'll make sure this airline regrets crossing me." Hanging in the air like a challenge, Maya was more than ready to meet, without breaking eye contact. She reached into her leather tote, her movements deliberate and calm, and tapped a single coded message on her phone. "Sky Shield 2A." This was no ordinary text. It was a discreet signal to Horizon's technical team, activating a protocol she'd designed with her cybersecurity chief to handle disruptive passengers by severing their onboard Wi-Fi access. Within seconds, Edward's iPad screen flashed a "no connection" error, his fingers jabbing futilely at the device as his lifeline to the outside world. His assistants, his lawyers, his influence, vanished. His face reddened, a vein pulsing at his temple. But Maya's expression remained serene, her silence a calculated weapon that let Edward's own arrogance unravel him. James Carter, the journalist in 3D, caught the subtle shift in dynamics, his camera still rolling as he leaned toward the woman next to him, whispering, "That's no coincidence. She's in control." The woman nodded, her eyes wide, and posted an update to her Instagram story. "This guy's about to learn he picked the wrong fight. #HorizonJustice." The hashtag, already trending with thousands of shares, surged as passengers live-streamed the scene, their videos capturing Edward's growing frustration as he tried to reconnect, muttering curses under his breath. Sarah Mitchell, the lawyer in 3C, seized the moment to amplify the pressure, standing once more to address the cabin. "This isn't just about a seat," she declared, her voice steady and resonant. "It's about someone thinking their wealth entitles them to disrespect others. We're all witnessing it, and we're not staying silent." Her words struck a chord, prompting a middle-aged couple in 4C and 4D to nod vigorously, one of them typing a tweet that read, "Shame on this man for his racism. Support the woman standing up for her rights." The cabin's collective anger was now a tangible force, its energy directed squarely at Edward, who shifted uncomfortably, his earlier bravado cracking. Rachel Nguyen, the flight attendant, exchanged a quick glance with Kevin, the lead crew member, who had positioned himself at the edge of the aisle, his authoritative presence a silent warning that the situation could escalate further. Maya, sensing the crew's readiness to intervene, chose her next move with precision. She leaned slightly toward Edward, her voice low but clear enough for nearby passengers to hear. "Mr. Langston, this flight operates under my airline's rules, and those rules apply to everyone, no matter how much they paid." The revelation landed like a thunderbolt. Gasps rippled through the cabin as passengers realized Maya wasn't just a passenger, but the CEO of Horizon Airlines. James, quick to capitalize, tweeted from his phone. "Breaking! The woman this guy's harassing is Maya Johnson, CEO of Horizon Airlines. He's done for #Horizon Justice." The tweet exploded, racking up thousands of retweets within minutes, as news outlets like CNN and the New York Times began picking up the story from passengers' live streams. Edward's eyes widened, a flicker of panic breaking through his facade. But he clung to his defiance, snarling, "I don't care who you think you are. I'm not moving." His voice, though, lacked its earlier conviction, and the passenger's growing boldness only deepened his isolation. A young tech entrepreneur in 5A, who had been quietly watching, spoke up, his voice calm but pointed. "You're embarrassing yourself. Man, just take your own seat." The comment drew murmurs of agreement, and Edward's hands clenched into fists, his iPad now useless in his lap. Maya, still standing, let the moment breathe, her silence amplifying the cabin's judgment. She knew that Sky Shield was only the first step. By cutting Edward's connectivity, she'd stripped away his ability to call in favors or intimidate the crew. But she also wanted him to feel the weight of his actions without her resorting to a direct confrontation. Sarah, sensing Maya's strategy, turned to the passengers, her lawyer's training kicking in. "Everyone here sees what's happening. This is about fairness, about standing up to someone who thinks they're above us all. Are we going to let this slide?" Her question sparked a chorus of "No" from several passengers, their voices rising in unison. The businessman in 2C, now fully engaged, added, "I've had enough of people like him throwing their weight around. Move, or face the consequences." Edward's face paled, his jaw tightening as he realized he was losing control of the narrative. Kevin, the lead flight attendant, stepped closer, his badge gleaming under the cabin lights. "Sir, I need you to return to your assigned seat now, or we'll have to involve security upon landing," he said, his tone firm but professional. Edward shot him a withering glare. But the lack of Wi-Fi, the passengers' open rebellion, and Maya's unshakable presence were eroding his confidence. He tried one last jab, his voice low and venomous. "You'll regret this. All of you. I have connections you can't imagine." But the threat fell flat, met with eye rolls and scoffs from the cabin. James, still filming, zoomed in on Maya's composed expression, knowing her restraint was the real story. A black woman, underestimated and insulted, wielding power with grace. The college student in 5B posted another update, her caption reading, "This CEO is a queen. This guy's about to learn a lesson he'll never forget." As the #Horizon Justice climbed to the top of social media trends, Maya felt a quiet surge of resolve. She knew this wasn't just about reclaiming her seat. It was about dismantling the kind of privilege that allowed Edward to believe he could demean her without consequence. Her phone buzzed softly in her tote, a message from her cybersecurity team confirming that Sky Shield was fully active, ensuring Edward remained digitally isolated. She allowed herself a brief glance out the window, the clouds below a reminder of the bigger picture. This flight, this moment, was a microcosm of the battles she'd fought her entire life, against doubt, against prejudice, against those who saw her as less now, with the cabin rallying behind her and Edward's arrogance crumbling. Maya prepared to let the situation unfold, knowing that the real power lay not in shouting back, but in standing firm and letting justice take its course. With the first-class cabin of Horizon Airlines Flight HA-247 now a cauldron of righteous indignation, Edward Langston's defiance began to crumble under the unrelenting pressure of passenger outrage and Maya Johnson's unyielding presence. Her subtle activation of the Sky Shield protocol having already severed his digital lifeline, leaving him visibly rattled as he clutched his useless iPad. The collective voice of the cabin, emboldened by Sarah Mitchell's call for fairness and James Carter's viral tweet identifying Maya as Horizon's CEO, had turned the tide, transforming Edward from a self-assured tycoon into a cornered figure, his face flushed with a mix of fury and humiliation, as Kevin, the lead flight attendant, reiterated his demand for Edward to return to his assigned seat. 4B. A new figure emerged from the front of the cabin, David Kim, Horizon's Vice President of Operations, who had been traveling incognito in 1C. Observing the escalating drama, David, a 52-year-old executive with a reputation for no-nonsense leadership, stepped into the aisle, his navy suit impeccable, his voice cutting through the tension like a gavel. "Mr. Langston, this ends now," he said, his tone unwavering, each word carrying the weight of authority. "Return to your seat immediately, or I'll personally ensure airport security meets us at the gate." The threat was no bluff. David's role gave him the power to enforce strict measures. And Edward, for the first time, seemed to grasp the gravity of his situation. His eyes darted around, meeting the steely gazes of passengers who had once been mere spectators, but now formed a unified front against him. Sarah, standing tall in the aisle, added fuel to the fire, her lawyer's voice ringing out. "You've had every chance to do the right thing, and you chose to double down on disrespect. This is on you." Her words, sharp and deliberate, drew nods from the couple in 4C and 4D, who were now openly filming, their phones capturing Edward's faltering composure for their thousands of social media followers. James, sensing the moment's significance, switched his phone to live stream mode, his voice low but clear as he narrated to his growing audience. "This is what happens when entitlement meets accountability. Maya Johnson, Horizon's CEO, is showing us what real leadership looks like." The live stream's view count skyrocketed, hitting 5,000 in minutes, with comments flooding in, "Take him down," and "Maya's a hero." Edward, his jaw clenched, tried one last defense, his voice trembling with desperation. "I have a medical condition," he claimed, his tone unconvincing. "I need this space for my health." David raised an eyebrow, his response swift and cutting. "Our records show no such condition. Mr. Langston, you're stalling, and it's not working." The cabin erupted in murmurs of agreement, the young mother in 4A whispering loudly enough for others to hear. "He's lying through his teeth." Kevin stepped closer, his presence a physical reminder of the crew's authority, and gestured toward 4B. "Sir, now," he said, his patience clearly exhausted. Edward's shoulders slumped, his earlier bravado reduced to a flicker of resentment. With a slow, resentful shuffle, he gathered his coat and iPad, his movements heavy with the weight of defeat, and trudged to 4B, avoiding eye contact with the passengers who now openly stared, some shaking their heads in disgust. Maya, still standing by 2A, finally eased into her seat, her movements graceful and deliberate, her face betraying no hint of triumph. The cabin seemed to exhale collectively, the tension dissipating like a storm passing, but the undercurrent of judgment lingered. Sarah returned to 3C, her expression a mix of satisfaction and resolve, while James continued filming, his lens now focused on Maya's poised demeanor, a silent testament to her strength. The college student in 5B posted a new update, her caption reading, "He's out. Justice served. Hashtag Horizon Justice," which was retweeted thousands of times. Pushing the hashtag to the top of national trends, David Kim, after ensuring Edward was settled in 4B, turned to Maya with a respectful nod. "Ms. Johnson, on behalf of Horizon Airlines, I apologize for this disruption," he said, loud enough for the cabin to hear, reinforcing her authority. Maya nodded graciously, her voice soft but firm. "Thank you. David, let's ensure this flight continues smoothly for everyone." Her words, measured and professional, underscored her leadership, earning murmurs of admiration from passengers. The businessman in 2C leaned toward his neighbor, whispering, "That's how you handle a bully without raising your voice." Rachel Nguyen, visibly relieved, began checking on passengers, her professionalism restored now that the immediate crisis had passed. But the repercussions were far from over. James's live stream, now at 100,000 views, was being shared by influencers and news outlets, with clips of Edward's outburst circulating on platforms like TikTok and Twitter, each accompanied by scathing captions like, "Entitled jerk gets what he deserves." Sarah, pulling out her laptop, drafted a LinkedIn post titled "Privilege on Trial at 3,000 Feet," detailing the incident and praising Maya's composure, which she shared with her 2,000 followers, sparking a flood of comments calling for accountability. Edward, now slouched in 4B, stared blankly at his disconnected iPad, the reality of his isolation sinking in. His phone, still cut off by Sky Shield, offered no escape, and the whispers around him. He thought he could bully her. What a disgrace, pierced his fragile ego. For a man accustomed to bending the world to his will, this public humiliation was a bitter pill, one he swallowed with a scowl, his hands gripping the armrests as if to anchor himself against the tide of scorn. Maya, seated in 2A, opened her laptop, her focus returning to her summit presentation. But her mind was sharp, tracking the unfolding dynamics. She knew this wasn't just a victory over one man's prejudice. It was a moment to redefine what power meant. Not the loud, bullying kind Edward wielded, but the quiet, principled strength that inspired others. The cabin, though calmer now, buzzed with a new energy, passengers exchanging glances of solidarity, their phones still active with posts and messages spreading the story. The young tech entrepreneur in 5A sent an email to his colleagues, describing Maya as the kind of leader we need more of, while the couple in 4C and 4D uploaded their videos to YouTube, titling them "CEO Shuts Down Racist Passenger." As the plane cruised toward Los Angeles, Maya allowed herself a moment to glance out the window, the vast sky a reminder of the broader fight for justice. She knew the real battle was just beginning, not just for her, but for everyone who had ever been diminished by arrogance like Edward's, with Sarah and James amplifying her stand, and the cabin united behind her. Maya felt a quiet certainty. This incident would ripple far beyond the confines of Flight HA-247, carrying a message of accountability that no amount of wealth or privilege could silence. As Horizon Airlines Flight HA-247 touched down in Los Angeles, the first-class cabin, still buzzing with the aftershocks of Edward Langston's public humiliation, transitioned from a battleground of prejudice to a symbol of collective triumph. With Maya Johnson's quiet resolve at its heart, the videos and live streams captured by passengers, now amassing over 5 million views across platforms like Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram, had turned Edward into a pariah, his name trending under hashtags like hashtag Horizon Justice and hashtag End Entitlement. Each post a damning indictment of his racist outburst. Edward, slouched in seat 4B, his face a mask of barely concealed rage, fumbled with his phone as the Sky Shield protocol lifted upon landing, only to be flooded with notifications, angry messages from colleagues, alerts from news outlets, and scathing social media mentions branding him the racist real estate mogul. His attempts to call his assistant and personal lawyer were met with curt responses. His firm's PR team, already in damage control, informed him that shareholders were demanding an emergency meeting, and major clients were pulling contracts, citing reputational risk, within hours. Edwards' carefully curated empire began to crack. His company's stock dipped 8% in after-hours trading, and a viral petition calling for his resignation as CEO gained 100,000 signatures by nightfall. Meanwhile, Maya, seated calmly in 2A, closed her laptop and prepared to disembark, her mind already shifting to the broader implications of the incident. As she stepped into the terminal, greeted by a small crowd of airport staff who had seen the viral clips, she was met with quiet nods of respect, their eyes reflecting admiration for her restraint. Sarah Mitchell, the human rights lawyer, lingered to exchange contact information with Maya, promising to amplify the story through her legal network. "This isn't just your win," Sarah said, her voice firm with conviction. "It's a wake-up call for every industry that lets people like him slide." James Carter, the journalist, was already drafting a feature for The Atlantic, titled "The Seat That Sparked a Movement," which detailed Maya's leadership and the cabin's solidarity, crediting her as a catalyst for change. By the time Maya reached Horizon's Los Angeles headquarters, the story had exploded globally, with news outlets like BBC and The Washington Post running headlines like "Airline CEO Stands Up to Racism at 3,000 Feet." Maya wasted no time, convening an emergency meeting with her senior leadership team to address the incident's fallout and chart a path forward. In a conference room overlooking the city, she outlined a bold plan: mandatory anti-racism and cultural sensitivity training for all 15,000 Horizon employees, from pilots to ground crew, and the creation of a diversity and inclusion council to oversee hiring, promotions, and passenger interactions. "This isn't just about one flight," she told her team, her voice steady but passionate. "It's about making Horizon a beacon of equality in an industry that's too often ignored these issues." The plan, rolled out within 48 hours, included partnerships with civil rights organizations and a $2 million fund for community outreach programs promoting equity. Social media erupted with praise, with influencers and activists lauding Horizon's swift response, and hashtag Horizon Justice trended alongside hashtag Maya Johnson, with users posting, "This is what leadership looks like," and, finally, "A company that walks the talk." Sarah's LinkedIn post, now shared 5,000 times, sparked a broader conversation about workplace discrimination, while James's article, published the next morning, garnered 2,000 views, its comments section filled with stories of others who had faced similar prejudice. Back in Chicago, Edwards' world continued to unravel. His board, under pressure from investors and public outcry, voted unanimously to remove him as CEO, citing conduct unbecoming of leadership. Major law firms, once eager for his business, declined to represent him, their rejections polite but firm, leaving Edward to face the consequences alone. His social media accounts, once filled with boasts of luxury vacations and real estate deals, were now flooded with criticism, forcing him to deactivate them. News reports dug into his past, uncovering a pattern of bullying behavior that had been swept under the rug by his wealth and connections, further cementing his fall from grace. Edward, holed up in his penthouse, stared at the headlines on his TV, the weight of his actions settling in, not just the loss of his position, but the realization that his privilege had blinded him to the humanity of others. Meanwhile, Maya's reforms at Horizon gained momentum. Employees embraced the training, with pilots sharing stories of microaggressions they'd witnessed, and ground staff proposing new protocols for handling passenger disputes. The Diversity Council, chaired by a respected civil rights advocate, began auditing Horizon's policies, ensuring every process reflected fairness. Public support poured in, with travel blogs naming Horizon the most inclusive airline and bookings surging 12% as customers rallied behind the company's values. Sarah, inspired by Maya, launched a pro bono initiative to support passengers facing discrimination, while James's article inspired a documentary pitch about workplace equity. With Maya as the centerpiece, Maya, though, remained focused on the bigger picture. In a press conference streamed to millions, she spoke humbly, deflecting personal praise. "This isn't about me," she said, her voice resonating with sincerity. "It's about building a world where no one has to fight for their dignity." Her words, shared widely, became a rallying cry for activists and everyday people alike. The young mother from 4A, now back home, posted a heartfelt video thanking Maya for showing her daughter what it means to stand up with grace. The college student in 5B started a campus campaign to raise awareness about racial bias, citing Maya as her inspiration. Edward, watching the news from his darkened penthouse, felt a pang of something unfamiliar, regret, for the first time. He questioned the worldview that had elevated him above others, but the damage was done. His name, once synonymous with power, was now a cautionary tale, while Maya's became a beacon of hope, as Horizon's reforms took root. The incident on Flight HA-247 transcended its moment, sparking a movement that challenged industries to confront privilege and embrace accountability. Maya, reflecting quietly at her desk, kept the boarding pass for 2A as a reminder, not of victory, but of the ongoing fight for justice. A fight she knew was far from over, but one she was ready to lead with unwavering resolve. As the dust settled from the viral storm surrounding Horizon Airlines Flight HA-247, Maya Johnson's stand in the first-class cabin became more than a fleeting moment of triumph. It ignited a lasting movement that reshaped not only Horizon Airlines, but the broader conversation about dignity and equality in public spaces. Months after the incident, Maya's boarding pass for Seat 2A rested quietly on her desk at Horizon's Los Angeles headquarters, a worn but powerful symbol of her unwavering commitment to justice, its edges frayed from her habit of holding it during moments of reflection. Horizon's newly implemented anti-racism training and Diversity and Inclusion Council had transformed the airline into a model of equity, with employee surveys reporting a 20% increase in workplace morale and customer satisfaction soaring as travelers praised the company's bold stance. Industry analysts noted a 15% surge in Horizon's market share, with passengers choosing the airline for its values as much as its service, and travel magazines crowned it the People's Airline, a title Maya cherished more than any corporate accolade. Beyond the company, her influence rippled outward. Universities invited her to speak on leadership, citing her as a case study in business ethics courses, while community organizations across the country adopted her story as a rallying cry for local anti-discrimination initiatives. Sarah Mitchell, the human rights lawyer from 3C, leveraged the incident to launch a national campaign called Stand for Dignity, partnering with civil rights groups to provide free legal support for victims of public discrimination, with over 1,000 cases filed in its first year, each inspired by Maya's example of grace under pressure. James Carter's documentary, Flight to Justice, premiered at a major film festival, earning critical acclaim for its raw portrayal of the confrontation and its aftermath. With Maya's quiet strength at its core, the film's streaming release on platforms like Netflix reached millions, sparking global discussions about privilege and accountability. Meanwhile, Edward Langston, once a titan of Chicago's real estate scene, remained a shadow of his former self, his penthouse now a lonely cage where he grappled with the wreckage of his reputation, stripped of his CEO title and shunned by former allies. Edward faced a barrage of lawsuits from former partners and a public that refused to forget his actions, with his name still surfacing in op-eds as a cautionary tale of hubris. In rare moments of introspection, he replayed the confrontation in his mind, haunted by Maya's unyielding gaze and the cabin's collective condemnation. Realizing too late that his wealth and status could not shield him from the consequences of his prejudice, he attempted a public apology on a minor podcast, but it was met with skepticism, dismissed as too little, too late, with listeners commenting, "He's only sorry because he got caught." Yet, in his solitude, Edward began to confront the uncomfortable truth. His belief in his own superiority had been his undoing, a lesson etched into his psyche by the very woman he'd underestimated. Back at Horizon, Maya's reforms continued to evolve, with the Diversity Council implementing mentorship programs for underrepresented employees, leading to a 30% increase in minority promotions within the company. The airline partnered with schools to offer scholarships in aviation careers, targeting students from marginalized communities, a program Maya personally oversaw. Inspired by her own journey from Atlanta's working-class neighborhoods, social media platforms, once a battleground for the incident's viral spread, became a space for celebration, with hashtag Horizon Justice evolving into a broader hashtag, hashtag Dignity for All, used by activists to highlight stories of resistance against injustice. Sarah's campaign gained traction, with her speaking at conferences alongside Maya. Their friendship forged in the crucible of that flight, now a powerful partnership for change. James, whose documentary won an award for social impact, donated a portion of the profits to Maya's scholarship fund, dedicating his acceptance speech to every passenger on HA 247 who stood up for what's right. The young mother from 4A, now an advocate in her community, started a blog sharing stories of everyday courage, crediting Maya for showing her that one person's stand can inspire thousands. The college student from 5B, now a senior, launched a campus organization to combat microaggressions, naming it after Maya's mantra, "Dignity is non-negotiable." Even the businessman from 2C, a typically reserved executive, wrote an op-ed in Forbes about the incident, urging corporate leaders to confront bias in their own ranks. Maya, ever humble, declined personal honors, including a prestigious leadership award, stating in a widely quoted interview, "The real reward is seeing a world where everyone's seat is respected, no matter who they are." Her words became a touchstone for activists, educators, and leaders, printed on posters and shared in classrooms. For Maya, the boarding pass on her desk was more than a memento. It was a reminder of the ongoing fight, a tangible link to the moment she chose principle over pride. Edward, in his isolation, began to understand this too. His nights spent staring at old photos of his once glorious career, now tainted by his own actions. He wrote an unpublished letter, never sent, expressing regret to Maya, a small step toward acknowledging the humanity he'd once dismissed. The legacy of Flight HA 247 transcended its 4-hour journey, becoming a cultural touchstone that challenged industries, communities, and individuals to rethink power and privilege. Horizon Airlines, under Maya's leadership, set a new standard, with competitors scrambling to adopt similar equity policies, fearful of being left behind in a world that demanded accountability. Sarah and James, now fixtures in the fight for justice, continued to amplify Maya's message, their work a testament to the power of collective action. The passengers of HA 247, from the young mother to the college student, carried the lesson forward, each in their own way, ensuring that the fight for dignity rippled through their lives and beyond. Maya, gazing out her office window at the planes taking off, felt a quiet pride, not in her own actions, but in the movement she'd sparked. The boarding pass, tucked beside her computer, was a silent vow to keep fighting, to keep leading, to keep proving that true power lies not in wealth or status, but in the courage to stand for what is right, uniting a world that, like that cabin, could rise together to demand respect for all,